Before a single punch is thrown, before a single challenge is spoken, Enter the Dragon arrives like a quiet storm gathering strength beyond the horizon. The film moves with the calm confidence of a master who no longer needs to prove anything. It is a story about discipline walking into chaos, wisdom stepping into violence, and a lone warrior carrying principles into a world built on greed and deception. Released in 1973, Enter the Dragon emerged during a fascinating moment in cinema history. Hollywood was searching for fresh global audiences, martial arts films were beginning to attract international attention, and studios were discovering that cultural boundaries could become opportunities rather than obstacles. What appeared on the surface to be an action picture was, in reality, a significant business experiment. Investors were wagering that Eastern martial arts philosophy could connect with Western audiences on an unprecedented scale. The film follows Lee, a highly skilled martial artist recruited to participate in a mysterious tournament held on a private island controlled by the enigmatic Han. Behind the competition lies a deeper mission involving criminal activity, intelligence gathering, personal vengeance, and moral responsibility. As the tournament unfolds, multiple agendas begin colliding beneath a carefully constructed spectacle of combat and ceremony. What makes the premise so effective is its elegant simplicity. The audience immediately understands the mission, the stakes, and the destination. Yet within that simplicity exists remarkable narrative efficiency. Every scene contributes either emotional information, character development, or strategic preparation. Nothing feels wasted. The screenplay behaves like a disciplined investment portfolio, allocating narrative resources only where meaningful returns are expected. From a production perspective, the film represented a creative gamble. Martial arts cinema had achieved regional success, but transforming it into a globally marketable product carried considerable uncertainty. The production budget was modest by Hollywood standards, estimated at roughly $1 million, yet even that figure represented substantial risk. The filmmakers were attempting to bridge cultures, industries, and audience expectations simultaneously. Bruce Lee stood at the center of this ambitious undertaking. By 1973, he had already developed a growing reputation, but global superstardom was not guaranteed. Investors were not simply funding an action movie. They were investing in a personality, a philosophy, and a new cinematic language. The question was whether audiences unfamiliar with martial arts traditions would embrace a storytelling style built around discipline, precision, and physical expression. Technology also played an important role. While modern audiences may associate innovation with digital effects and computer-generated imagery, filmmaking technology in the early 1970s relied heavily on camera placement, editing rhythm, sound synchronization, practical choreography, and optical storytelling. Every movement had to be captured effectively in camera. Every action sequence depended upon timing, rehearsal, and execution rather than post-production rescue. Viewed through an economic lens, Enter the Dragon resembles a startup launching an entirely new product category. The filmmakers identified an underserved market. They recognized growing curiosity about martial arts. They combined proven action film structures with unique cultural elements. Then they introduced the finished product to a global audience. Such ventures frequently fail. Occasionally, they redefine industries. One reason the film continues attracting viewers decades later is its confidence in visual storytelling. It trusts movement. It trusts silence. It trusts observation. Rather than overwhelming audiences with exposition, it allows viewers to interpret character through behavior. That approach creates engagement because people become active participants rather than passive recipients. The island itself functions as more than a setting. It becomes a symbolic marketplace where competing values are exchanged. Honor confronts corruption. Discipline confronts indulgence. Self-control confronts excess. Every character entering the tournament carries different motivations, creating a fascinating ecosystem of incentives and consequences. The film also benefits from remarkable accessibility. Viewers do not need extensive knowledge of martial arts to understand the emotional stakes. Everyone understands loyalty. Everyone understands loss. Everyone understands the desire to confront injustice. The screenplay translates specialized skills into universal emotions, dramatically expanding audience reach and commercial potential. Looking back, it is easy to view the film's success as inevitable. History often creates that illusion. Yet at the moment of production, nothing was guaranteed. Studios routinely misjudged audience demand. International distribution remained uncertain. Cultural crossover projects carried substantial financial risk. Enter the Dragon succeeded because it balanced artistic identity with commercial clarity. As we begin this deep dive, it is worth remembering that the film is more than a martial arts classic. It is a case study in cinematic entrepreneurship. It demonstrates how psychology, technology, finance, and storytelling can align around a singular vision. The result is not merely a movie, but a landmark example of creative ambition transformed into lasting cultural value. After establishing its premise with remarkable efficiency, the film begins behaving like a carefully managed startup entering its research and development phase. The destination has been identified, the mission has been assigned, and the principal stakeholders are now moving toward a high-risk environment where information is limited and uncertainty is abundant. The first half of the story is devoted to building investment. Not financial investment, but emotional investment. The audience is being asked to trust that every small detail introduced now will eventually produce meaningful returns later. Lee's journey begins before he ever reaches Han's Island. These opening moments are deceptively important because they establish the psychological foundation of the entire narrative. Rather than portraying him as an unstoppable machine, the film presents him as disciplined, thoughtful, and guided by principles larger than himself. This creates immediate audience confidence. In business terms, the filmmakers are establishing brand credibility before launching the product. The mission itself emerges through multiple layers. Lee is not simply attending a tournament. He is participating in an operation involving intelligence gathering, criminal investigation, and personal responsibility. The screenplay cleverly combines several motivations into a single objective. This increases narrative efficiency because every future action can simultaneously serve multiple purposes. We are then introduced to additional competitors whose stories intersect with the main narrative. Roper enters as a charismatic gambler carrying financial problems on his shoulders. Williams arrives as a skilled fighter attempting to escape pressures and consequences from his previous life. These characters function much like secondary stakeholders in a business venture. They possess their own objectives, incentives, and risks. One of the smartest decisions made by the screenplay is allowing these individuals enough space to feel independent. Lesser films might have treated them merely as supporting figures orbiting around the protagonist. Instead, each arrives with personal motivations that immediately create curiosity. The audience begins tracking multiple narrative investments simultaneously. Roper represents risk tolerance. He constantly makes decisions based on confidence, probability, and personal instinct. Williams represents resistance against systems of control and authority. Lee represents discipline and purpose. Together, these three perspectives create a fascinating psychological ecosystem before the tournament even begins. The voyage toward the island functions almost like a transition from the ordinary marketplace into a controlled experimental environment. Once participants arrive, normal rules begin fading away. The setting itself becomes an instrument of suspense. Every hallway, courtyard, dock, and gathering area feels carefully designed to communicate both luxury and hidden danger. This is where pacing becomes particularly impressive. Modern action films often rush towards spectacle, fearing audience impatience. Enter the Dragon demonstrates confidence in gradual escalation. The filmmakers understand that anticipation creates value. Delaying major confrontations actually increases their eventual impact. The audience becomes more invested because tension accumulates steadily rather than being spent immediately. Han's introduction is another excellent example of narrative prototyping. The film does not reveal everything about him at once. Instead, information arrives in carefully measured increments. We observe his authority. We observe his wealth. We observe his influence over the island. Each new detail expands audience curiosity while preserving mystery. From a startup perspective, Han resembles the founder of a highly successful enterprise whose public image conceals troubling realities. His operation appears organized, profitable, and sophisticated. Yet subtle signs suggest hidden weaknesses beneath the polished exterior. The screenplay continuously invites viewers to investigate beyond appearances. The tournament preparations themselves serve multiple purposes. On the surface, they promise exciting martial arts competition. Beneath that promise lies strategic positioning. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to gather information. Every conversation reveals something about power structures operating on the island. Every ceremonial event contributes to the growing sense that something larger is unfolding. Lee's investigation begins quietly. Rather than charging directly into conflict, he observes first. This reflects one of the film's most important psychological lessons. Effective leaders rarely act before understanding the environment. Observation precedes action. Information precedes commitment. The character's patience becomes one of his greatest strengths. Meanwhile, the audience experiences a similar process. Rather than receiving complete answers, viewers accumulate fragments of evidence. This creates active engagement. People begin forming theories, anticipating revelations, and evaluating risks alongside the protagonist. The story transforms viewers into participants within the investigation. The island's atmosphere deserves particular attention because it functions almost like an additional character. Beauty and menace coexist everywhere. Elegant architecture stands beside hidden corruption. Formal ceremonies conceal darker intentions. Wealth masks exploitation. This contrast strengthens the central themes concerning appearances versus reality. As the first tournament activities begin, the film carefully demonstrates different fighting philosophies through visual storytelling. Combat is not presented merely as violence. Each encounter reveals personality. Some fighters rely on aggression. Others depend upon strategy. Others trust discipline and adaptability. The audience learns about characters through movement rather than exposition. Financially speaking, this section of the film showcases extraordinary efficiency. The production budget was relatively modest, yet the filmmakers create the impression of a much larger world. Through intelligent location use, disciplined cinematography, and effective production design, they maximize perceived value without requiring extravagant expenditure. The emotional investment continues growing because multiple forms of risk are now active simultaneously. Lee faces mission failure. Roper faces financial uncertainty. Williams faces personal consequences. The tournament competitors face physical danger. Han faces potential exposure. Every major character has something meaningful at stake. By the midpoint, the film has accomplished a remarkable balancing act. It has introduced its world, established its characters, defined competing motivations, expanded mystery, and increased tension without exhausting audience attention. Like a successful company completing its development phase, the narrative has built a strong foundation. The prototypes have been tested, the market interest has been confirmed, and the stage is now set for larger risks, greater revelations, and the powerful payoffs that will define the second half of the story. As the second half begins, the film enters the stage where every successful venture must eventually arrive: execution. The planning phase is over. The prototypes have been tested. Assumptions are about to collide with reality. What makes Enter the Dragon so satisfying is that it understands a simple truth shared by both storytelling and business. A promise only has value if it is eventually fulfilled. The narrative now begins collecting returns on every investment made during the first half. The tension surrounding Han's Island starts transforming into direct conflict. Lee's investigation uncovers evidence confirming the corruption hidden beneath the island's polished exterior. The elegant ceremonies, disciplined routines, and sophisticated presentation begin revealing themselves as carefully maintained masks concealing criminal operations. The audience experiences the same realization as the protagonist. Suspicion evolves into certainty. This transition represents excellent payoff design. Earlier scenes invested heavily in atmosphere, mystery, and unanswered questions. Now the film begins releasing information at precisely the right pace. Answers emerge gradually enough to maintain suspense, but quickly enough to reward viewer patience. This balance is surprisingly difficult to achieve, yet the screenplay handles it with remarkable confidence. Lee's nighttime exploration of the island becomes one of the most important sequences in the entire film. From a narrative perspective, it serves as a breakthrough moment. Until now, much of the story has operated through observation and inference. Here, evidence becomes tangible. Hidden operations, secret facilities, and organized criminal activity move from rumor to reality. The sequence also demonstrates effective risk management. Every decision Lee makes carries increasing consequences. The deeper he ventures into Han's operation, the greater the danger becomes. This escalating exposure creates authentic suspense because failure would now affect far more than personal safety. Larger missions and broader responsibilities have entered the equation. Meanwhile, the supporting characters continue generating emotional value. Roper and Williams are not abandoned once their introductions are complete. Their individual journeys continue influencing the larger narrative. This is an example of strong narrative asset utilization. The screenplay extracts maximum value from established characters rather than allowing them to become decorative background elements. Williams' storyline, in particular, contributes significantly to the growing sense of danger. His confrontation with Han serves as an important demonstration of power dynamics operating on the island. The audience witnesses the consequences of challenging authority within Han's carefully controlled environment. The moment increases emotional stakes without requiring elaborate exposition. Han himself becomes increasingly fascinating during this portion of the film. Earlier, he existed primarily as a mystery. Now he evolves into a fully active antagonist. What makes him effective is that his power extends beyond physical confrontation. He represents a complete system of corruption, wealth, manipulation, and exploitation. Defeating him requires more than winning a fight. It requires dismantling an entire structure. From a psychological perspective, Han embodies a common leadership failure. Success has convinced him of his own invulnerability. Wealth, influence, and control have gradually separated him from reality. Many organizations collapse not because their leaders lack intelligence, but because prolonged success reduces their ability to recognize vulnerabilities. Han illustrates this phenomenon perfectly. As tensions escalate, the tournament itself begins functioning less as a sporting competition and more as a battlefield of competing philosophies. Discipline confronts arrogance. Integrity confronts corruption. Self-mastery confronts domination. The martial arts action remains exciting, but beneath the surface the conflicts are fundamentally moral and psychological. One reason audiences remain invested throughout these sequences is that victories never feel automatic. Lee possesses extraordinary abilities, yet the film consistently preserves uncertainty. Effective storytelling requires resistance. Without obstacles, achievement loses value. Every challenge strengthens audience engagement because success must be earned rather than assumed. The pacing during this section deserves special recognition. Notice how the film alternates between investigation, confrontation, discovery, and action. This creates rhythm. Too much combat would become exhausting. Too much exposition would reduce momentum. The filmmakers carefully balance both elements, ensuring that energy continues building toward the climax. Financially speaking, this is where the production begins collecting maximum return on earlier investments. Sets introduced previously gain new significance. Character relationships established earlier generate emotional payoff. Mysteries planted during the first half produce revelations. The screenplay demonstrates excellent ROI because nearly every narrative asset introduced earlier now contributes measurable value. The climax approaches with remarkable efficiency. Multiple narrative threads begin converging toward a single destination. Lee's mission, Han's criminal enterprise, the tournament environment, and the personal motivations of various characters all intersect simultaneously. Such convergence creates momentum because viewers understand that resolution is approaching. The final confrontations succeed because they are not merely physical contests. They represent the collision of opposing worldviews. Lee's discipline has been tested repeatedly throughout the film. Han's corruption has expanded unchecked for years. When these forces finally meet directly, the audience understands the significance extending beyond simple victory or defeat. The famous mirror sequence remains particularly effective because it transforms psychology into visual storytelling. Reflections create confusion. Reality becomes difficult to identify. The environment itself becomes part of the conflict. Instead of relying solely upon physical spectacle, the film introduces symbolic meaning. The battle becomes a study of perception, deception, and clarity. When the conflict ultimately reaches resolution, the payoff feels earned because every major narrative investment has generated returns. The mission is completed. Corruption is exposed. Justice is delivered. Character arcs reach meaningful conclusions. The audience experiences satisfaction because the film honors commitments made earlier in the story. This is what marketers might call exceptional product-market fit. The film promised mystery, action, philosophy, suspense, and emotional engagement. The second half delivers each of those elements while preserving coherence and momentum. Many productions introduce compelling ideas, but fail to execute them effectively. Enter the Dragon succeeds because its execution proves as disciplined as its philosophy. By the conclusion, viewers are left with more than memories of combat sequences. They remember principles, choices, consequences, and character. The story demonstrates that genuine strength is not measured solely through physical ability, but through discipline, purpose, and moral clarity. That deeper message is what transforms a successful action film into a lasting cultural landmark whose influence continues decades after its original release. At the heart of Enter the Dragon lies a fascinating psychological study disguised as a martial arts adventure. The punches, kicks, and confrontations may attract attention initially, but the true engine driving the story is human decision-making. Every major character operates according to a unique set of incentives, fears, ambitions, and beliefs. The film becomes far more interesting when viewed as a laboratory of behavioral economics where different personalities respond to pressure, opportunity, and risk. Lee represents perhaps the most psychologically disciplined character in the entire film. His actions rarely emerge from impulse. Instead, they originate from observation, reflection, and intentional choice. In modern behavioral science, this would be considered a high degree of executive control. Rather than allowing emotion to dictate behavior, he evaluates circumstances before acting. This creates a remarkable contrast with many action protagonists whose decisions are driven primarily by anger or revenge. What makes Lee particularly compelling is that he is not emotionless. He experiences loss, injustice, and personal responsibility. The difference is that he processes those emotions through discipline rather than surrendering to them. This distinction forms one of the central psychological messages of the film. Strength is not the absence of emotion. Strength is the ability to govern emotion. From an economic perspective, Lee consistently demonstrates an awareness of opportunity cost. Every decision carries alternatives. Every action eliminates other possibilities. When he accepts his mission, he knowingly exposes himself to danger. Yet, he judges the potential benefits to outweigh the risks. His behavior reflects rational decision-making under uncertainty. Han provides an equally fascinating case study from the opposite direction. He possesses intelligence, resources, influence, and organizational power. Yet despite these advantages, his leadership suffers from a common psychological trap. Success has gradually convinced him that he exists beyond ordinary consequences. Behavioral economists often describe this phenomenon as overconfidence bias. Overconfidence can be enormously profitable in the short term. Confident leaders attract followers, investors, and opportunities. However, excessive confidence eventually distorts risk assessment. Individuals begin underestimating threats while overestimating their own abilities. Han's empire demonstrates precisely this vulnerability. His power becomes so extensive that he stops recognizing dangers developing around him. Another important element of Han's psychology is control. He does not merely seek wealth. He seeks dominance over environments and people. Control provides psychological comfort because it reduces uncertainty. Yet excessive control often creates fragile systems. When everything depends upon one central authority, the entire structure becomes vulnerable to disruption. Roper represents a completely different behavioral profile. He is charismatic, adaptable, and highly comfortable with risk. Throughout the film, he behaves much like an entrepreneur operating in volatile markets. He frequently relies on instinct rather than certainty. Sometimes this produces rewards. Sometimes it creates complications. Economically speaking, Roper exhibits strong risk tolerance. Most people experience significant psychological discomfort when facing uncertainty. Roper appears energized by it. Gambling, negotiation, and improvisation all appeal to him because they offer the possibility of outsized rewards. This mindset can create tremendous opportunities, but it can also expose individuals to catastrophic losses. His financial troubles illustrate another principle of behavioral economics. People often continue pursuing risky solutions when attempting to escape previous mistakes. Rather than reducing exposure, they increase it. This cycle can trap individuals in escalating commitments. Roper frequently walks near that psychological edge throughout the story. Williams offers perhaps the most emotionally complex psychology among the supporting characters. He carries experiences that have shaped his worldview and influenced his interactions with authority. Unlike Lee, whose discipline creates internal stability, Williams often operates under pressure generated by previous conflicts and unresolved frustrations. His behavior highlights an important psychological reality. Past experiences influence present decision-making, even when circumstances change. Humans rarely evaluate situations from a perfectly neutral position. Memories, disappointments, and prior successes all affect judgment. Williams embodies this principle throughout his journey. The tournament environment itself functions as a psychological stress test. Under ordinary circumstances, people can carefully manage their public image. Under pressure, true priorities emerge. Competition, uncertainty, and danger strip away many social masks. The island becomes a place where character is revealed rather than concealed. One reason the film remains compelling is that each major character responds differently to the same environment. Some pursue power. Some pursue survival. Some pursue justice. Behavioral economists often emphasize that incentives matter. The same situation can produce dramatically different outcomes depending on the motivations of the individuals involved. Leadership pressure also plays a significant role throughout the story. Han manages a large operation requiring constant supervision and authority. Lee carries the burden of mission success. Even secondary characters face expectations imposed by circumstance. Leadership is frequently portrayed as glamorous, yet the film quietly acknowledges its psychological costs. Trauma response appears throughout the narrative as well. Characters who have experienced loss or hardship do not respond identically. Some become more disciplined. Some become more aggressive. Some become more cautious. Modern psychology recognizes that adversity can produce a wide spectrum of outcomes depending upon personality, support systems, and personal interpretation. The film also explores reputation economics. Reputation functions almost like currency within the story. Fighters arrive with established reputations that influence how others perceive them. Respect, fear, trust, and status all operate as valuable social assets. Once earned, reputation can open doors. Once damaged, it can become difficult to restore. Another fascinating concept is moral risk. Every character encounters situations where personal gain conflicts with ethical responsibility. These moments reveal underlying values more effectively than speeches ever could. Choices made under temptation often expose the true architecture of character. Ultimately, Enter the Dragon suggests that the most valuable asset a person can possess is self-mastery. Wealth can disappear. Power can shift. Organizations can collapse. Physical strength inevitably fades with time. Yet the ability to understand oneself, regulate emotions, and act according to principles remains enduring. Through Lee's example and Han's downfall, the film presents a powerful lesson in psychology and behavioral economics. The greatest victories are often won internally long before they become visible externally. Enter the Dragon is often remembered for its legendary action sequences, but from a business perspective it is equally fascinating as a case study in cinematic investment. Behind every iconic scene stood producers, distributors, investors, technicians, and executives attempting to answer a difficult question. Could a martial arts film led by an Asian star become a truly global commercial success? In 1973, that question carried significant financial uncertainty. The production budget was approximately $1 million, a modest figure even by the standards of its era. Yet budget size alone never determines risk. Risk is measured by uncertainty. The filmmakers were entering relatively uncharted territory. While martial arts films had achieved regional popularity, their ability to generate substantial returns across North America and Europe remained largely unproven. From an investor's perspective, the project resembled a startup introducing a disruptive product into an established marketplace. Traditional Hollywood action heroes dominated theaters. Audience expectations were built around familiar stars and familiar formulas. Enter the Dragon proposed a different model. Instead of relying primarily on firearms, car chases, or military spectacle, it centered physical discipline, martial arts philosophy, and Eastern cultural influences. This strategic positioning created both opportunity and danger. Opportunity emerged from differentiation. The film offered something audiences had not experienced before on such a scale. Danger emerged because consumers often resist unfamiliar products. Every innovative investment must navigate this tension between novelty and acceptance. The partnership between American and Hong Kong filmmaking interests represented another important financial calculation. Rather than functioning as a purely local production, the film was designed from the beginning to appeal to international audiences. In modern business language, the project pursued global market expansion rather than regional specialization. Distribution strategy played a crucial role in reducing financial risk. Wide audience exposure increases the probability of commercial success, particularly when a product possesses strong word-of-mouth potential. Enter the Dragon benefited enormously from audience enthusiasm. Viewers did not simply watch the film, they recommended it. Every enthusiastic recommendation became a form of unpaid marketing. Marketing expenditures during the period were far smaller than those associated with modern blockbusters, yet promotional strategy remained essential. Posters, trailers, television appearances, print advertisements, and theatrical placement all contributed to audience awareness. The challenge was educating viewers about a relatively unfamiliar cinematic experience while simultaneously generating excitement. Bruce Lee himself became the film's most valuable marketing asset. Today, studios frequently discuss brand equity. Brand equity refers to the value associated with recognition, trust, and audience enthusiasm. Lee possessed extraordinary brand potential because he represented authenticity. His skills were not manufactured through editing tricks or publicity campaigns. Audiences believed what they were seeing. Authenticity generates economic value because it creates trust. Consumers are more willing to invest time and money when they perceive sincerity. Enter the Dragon benefited tremendously from this phenomenon. Viewers sensed they were witnessing genuine mastery rather than manufactured spectacle. The film's release strategy also benefited from timing. During the early 1970s, audiences increasingly sought fresh cinematic experiences. Cultural curiosity regarding martial arts was growing. Fitness movements were expanding. Interest in Eastern philosophy was becoming more visible. The film entered the marketplace at a moment when demand conditions were unusually favorable. One of the most impressive aspects of the project was its ability to maximize perceived value. Audiences often assume expensive films automatically appear larger and more impressive. In reality, intelligent resource allocation frequently matters more than absolute spending. Enter the Dragon used locations, choreography, costumes, production design, and cinematography efficiently enough to create an experience that felt substantially larger than its actual budget. This efficiency resembles successful startups that achieve significant market impact without possessing the resources of major corporations. Resource constraints can encourage innovation. When money is limited, every expenditure must justify itself. Waste becomes more visible. Creative solutions become more valuable. The film's action sequences represent excellent examples of high-return investment. Training, choreography, rehearsal, and camera planning required substantial effort, but these expenditures generated enormous audience satisfaction. The resulting scenes became enduring assets that continued attracting viewers long after initial release. Revenue performance ultimately validated the creative gamble. The film generated well over $100 million worldwide over time, depending on the source and accounting methodology used. Even conservative estimates reveal extraordinary returns relative to the original production budget. By any reasonable standard, the project delivered exceptional ROI. When analysts evaluate investments, they often examine multiples. How many times larger were returns than initial costs? Enter the Dragon produced returns that transformed a relatively modest production into one of the most profitable cinematic ventures of its era. Few investors could have anticipated the magnitude of its commercial impact. Beyond box office performance, the film generated additional forms of economic value. Home video releases, television licensing, international distribution rights, merchandising opportunities, educational discussions, and cultural influence all contributed to long-term revenue generation. Successful intellectual property frequently continues producing value decades after initial release. Another important financial concept visible here is ecosystem creation. The film did not merely earn money for itself. It expanded opportunities for martial arts cinema more broadly. Studios became more willing to finance similar projects. Distributors became more interested in international collaborations. Entire markets grew because one project demonstrated commercial viability. Bruce Lee's legacy became an economic force of its own. His image, philosophy, and influence continued generating value long after the film's release. This illustrates a powerful business principle. Sometimes the most valuable outcome of a successful project is not immediate profit, but the creation of a lasting brand. Looking back, Enter the Dragon can be described as a $1 million experiment that produced global cultural and financial returns far beyond initial expectations. It proved that disciplined storytelling, authentic talent, intelligent resource allocation, and strategic distribution could outperform much larger competitors. The film remains not only a martial arts masterpiece, but also a remarkable lesson in ROI, market positioning, and creative entrepreneurship. When people discuss Enter the Dragon, they often focus on Bruce Lee's charisma, the action choreography, or the cultural impact. Yet beneath the surface lies an impressive achievement in filmmaking technology. The film was created during an era when digital tools did not exist to rescue mistakes, enhance performances, or manufacture spectacle after production. Every creative decision depended on planning, craftsmanship, and execution. In many ways, the movie represents a masterclass in maximizing technological capability within the constraints of its time. Modern audiences live in a world of CGI environments, digital doubles, motion capture systems, and artificial intelligence-assisted workflows. Enter the Dragon belonged to a completely different technological ecosystem. Cameras recorded physical reality. Editors worked with physical film strips. Visual effects options were limited. If a sequence needed to look convincing, it generally had to be convincing in front of the camera. This limitation became one of the film's greatest strengths. Because technology could not easily create illusions, the production relied heavily on authentic performance. Bruce Lee's movements were not enhanced by computer-generated imagery. The speed, precision, timing, and power visible on screen originated from genuine skill. This authenticity created a psychological connection that audiences could immediately recognize. The camera systems available during the early 1970s were mechanical marvels compared to previous generations, yet they required substantial expertise. Every shot demanded careful consideration of exposure, focus, film stock selection, and movement. Unlike modern digital productions where footage can be reviewed instantly, filmmakers often had limited opportunities to verify results during shooting. This reality increased the importance of preparation. Camera operators, directors, choreographers, and performers needed to coordinate with extraordinary precision. Mistakes consumed both time and money. Every additional take represented a direct financial cost. Technology therefore influenced behavior by encouraging discipline throughout the production process. Martial arts cinematography presents unique technical challenges. The audience must clearly see movement while maintaining dramatic energy. If cameras are positioned poorly, techniques become confusing. If editing becomes excessive, the illusion of skill disappears. Enter the Dragon solved this challenge through intelligent visual design. Many action films conceal limitations through rapid editing. Enter the Dragon often does the opposite. The filmmakers frequently allow shots to breathe. The camera observes rather than interrupts. This approach permits viewers to appreciate timing, distance, rhythm, and technique. Technologically, this reflects confidence in both performers and cinematographers. Lens selection played an important role as well. Different lenses influence audience psychology in subtle ways. Wider lenses create spatial awareness and environmental context. Longer lenses compress distance and isolate subjects. Throughout the film, lens choices help guide emotional attention without drawing obvious attention to themselves. The island environment benefited enormously from careful photographic planning. Tropical landscapes, stone architecture, courtyards, and interior chambers all possess distinct visual identities. Capturing these spaces effectively required balancing natural light with cinematic clarity. The resulting images create an atmosphere that feels simultaneously beautiful and threatening. Color also deserves attention. Modern productions often rely on sophisticated color grading software such as DaVinci Resolve to shape emotional responses. Enter the Dragon achieved much of its visual character through production design, costume choices, lighting decisions, and film stock characteristics. Technology was less flexible than modern systems, making artistic decisions even more critical. Editing represented another technological discipline where the film excelled. Today, editors can manipulate digital timelines with extraordinary speed. In 1973, editing involved physically handling film elements. The process demanded patience, organization, and precision. Every cut required deliberate thought because experimentation carried greater logistical cost. The pacing of Enter the Dragon demonstrates remarkable editorial intelligence. Action sequences accelerate energy when necessary. Investigative scenes slow the rhythm to build suspense. Character moments create emotional investment. The editors continuously balance momentum and clarity, ensuring that viewers remain engaged without becoming overwhelmed. Sound technology was equally important. While audiences often focus on visuals, sound shapes emotional perception just as powerfully. Every impact, footstep, environmental sound, and musical cue contributes to immersion. The film sound team had to construct convincing auditory experiences using the recording and mixing technologies available at the time. Bruce Lee's fighting style itself functioned almost like a technological advantage. His movements were exceptionally efficient. Efficiency matters in engineering because unnecessary motion wastes energy. The same principle applies to martial arts. Lee's techniques appear visually striking partly because they eliminate excess movement. The result is a form of physical communication that cameras capture exceptionally well. One fascinating aspect of the production is how practical effects dominate the viewing experience. Contemporary audiences are accustomed to digital enhancement. Enter the Dragon relies primarily on real locations, real performers, practical choreography, physical props, and tangible environments. This creates a texture that remains convincing decades later because reality possesses details difficult to simulate artificially. From a workflow perspective, the production resembles a highly coordinated engineering project. Directors managed creative vision. Cinematographers managed image capture. Editors managed narrative rhythm. Sound teams managed auditory immersion. Producers managed schedules and budgets. Every department contributed specialized expertise toward a unified objective. If produced today, the film might employ ERRI Alexa cameras, high dynamic range workflows, digital color pipelines, drone cinematography, Avid Media Composer editing systems, DaVinci Resolve grading suites, and Pro Tools sound environments. Yet the underlying principles would remain unchanged. Technology succeeds only when it serves storytelling. What makes Enter the Dragon particularly valuable as a technological case study is that it demonstrates how innovation is not merely about possessing advanced tools. Innovation often emerges from using available tools intelligently. The filmmakers understood the strengths and limitations of their equipment and designed the production accordingly. Ultimately, the technological achievement of Enter the Dragon lies in its invisibility. The audience rarely thinks about cameras, lenses, editing equipment, or sound systems while watching. Instead, viewers become immersed in the story. That is the highest compliment any filmmaking technology can receive. The tools disappear, the experience remains, And decades later, the film continues demonstrating how disciplined craftsmanship can transform limited resources into enduring cinematic excellence. If Enter the Dragon demonstrates excellence in storytelling and technology, it also serves as a remarkable lesson in production management. Every film is ultimately a manufacturing operation. Instead of producing automobiles, software, or electronics, the production manufactures experiences. Yet the underlying business challenges are surprisingly similar. Resources must be allocated, schedules must be maintained, teams must be coordinated, and risks must be managed. The audience sees only the finished product, but behind every scene exists a vast organizational structure. Motion pictures are often romanticized as purely artistic endeavors. In reality, they are complex logistical enterprises involving hundreds of interconnected decisions. Producers must balance creative ambitions against financial limitations. Directors must translate vision into actionable tasks. Department heads must synchronize their work with dozens of other specialists. Success depends not merely upon talent, but upon coordination. Enter the Dragon represented an especially interesting management challenge because it involved collaboration between different filmmaking cultures. International productions create opportunities for expanded audiences and shared expertise, but they also introduce complexity. Different working methods, communication styles, expectations, and operational practices must be integrated into a single functioning system. From a project management perspective, the production resembles a multinational corporation launching a major product across multiple markets simultaneously. Every department becomes part of a larger supply chain. Delays in one area affect every other area. Efficiency becomes essential because time directly influences cost. One of the most valuable resources on any film production is not equipment, locations, or even money. It is time. Every day of production consumes labor, facilities, transportation, catering, accommodation, and administrative support. A schedule that slips by a few days can generate substantial financial consequences. Effective productions therefore treat time as a form of capital. The action sequences required particularly careful planning. Martial arts choreography is far more complex than it may appear on screen. Every movement must be rehearsed repeatedly. Camera placements must be coordinated with performer positioning. Safety considerations must be addressed. Timing must remain consistent across multiple takes. Bruce Lee's extraordinary preparation likely reduced production inefficiencies significantly. Skilled performers create value because they require fewer corrective measures. Their consistency improves scheduling reliability. Their expertise allows directors and cinematographers to execute ambitious plans with greater confidence. Consider the challenge of organizing a tournament scene involving multiple fighters, extras, camera operators, lighting crews, costume departments, makeup artists, production assistants, and logistical coordinators. Each participant must understand objectives, timing, responsibilities, and contingency plans. A failure in communication can disrupt an entire day of production. Leadership hierarchy plays a critical role in solving these challenges. Successful productions rarely operate through chaos. They rely upon clear chains of responsibility. Producers oversee strategic objectives. Directors manage creative execution. Assistant directors coordinate schedules. Department heads supervise specialized functions. This hierarchy allows information to flow efficiently throughout the organization. The island locations visible throughout the film also introduce significant logistical considerations. Transporting equipment, personnel, costumes, props, and technical resources requires careful planning. Weather conditions must be monitored. Access routes must be maintained. Every location creates opportunities, but also operational risks. In many respects, filmmaking resembles military logistics. Large groups of people must arrive at specific locations with the correct equipment at precisely the right time. The audience experiences seamless storytelling because enormous effort has been invested in preventing disruptions behind the scenes. Workforce allocation becomes especially important when budgets are limited. Every production faces resource constraints. Managers must determine where expenditures generate the highest returns. Additional personnel may accelerate certain tasks while increasing costs. Reducing staff may save money while increasing schedule risk. These trade-offs require constant evaluation. Enter the Dragon demonstrates impressive resource optimization. The production creates the impression of a larger operation than its budget might suggest. This indicates effective deployment of personnel, locations, and equipment. Good management frequently involves maximizing impact rather than maximizing spending. Another fascinating aspect of studio economics involves risk distribution. Producers, distributors, financiers, and exhibitors all possess different incentives. Each participant evaluates risk through a different lens. Investors seek returns. Distributors seek audience reach. Creative teams seek artistic success. Effective management aligns these objectives sufficiently to maintain momentum. The film also benefits from operational clarity. Everyone involved appears to understand the project's identity. Confusion often damages productions because departments begin pursuing contradictory objectives. Enter the Dragon maintains remarkable consistency in tone, style, pacing, and presentation, suggesting strong leadership and unified vision throughout development and execution. Contingency planning is another overlooked component of filmmaking. Productions rarely unfold exactly as expected. Equipment can malfunction. Weather can change. Locations can become unavailable. Personnel can become injured or delayed. Successful managers anticipate potential disruptions before they occur and prepare alternative solutions. Bruce Lee's role extended beyond performance. His influence over the film's martial arts presentation contributed to operational efficiency as well. Subject matter experts often improve project outcomes because they reduce uncertainty. When organizations possess access to genuine expertise, decision-making becomes faster and more reliable. Looking at the finished film, it becomes clear that every department contributed effectively toward shared objectives. Production design supports storytelling. Costumes reinforce character identity. Cinematography enhances atmosphere. Editing maintains momentum. Sound strengthens immersion. Such alignment rarely occurs accidentally. It is usually the result of disciplined management. Ultimately, Enter the Dragon demonstrates that cinema is not merely an artistic medium, but also a sophisticated organizational achievement. Behind every memorable moment stands a network of schedules, budgets, personnel, logistics, leadership structures, and operational decisions. The film reminds us that great art often emerges not from chaos, but from carefully coordinated effort, where time is treated as capital, expertise is treated as an asset, and execution transforms vision into reality. One reason Enter the Dragon has endured for more than 5 decades is that it feels grounded despite its larger-than-life action. Beneath the dramatic confrontations and cinematic spectacle lies a surprising commitment to realism. The film does not attempt to be a documentary, yet it incorporates enough authentic martial arts philosophy, cultural detail, and human behavior to create a sense of credibility. This balance between entertainment and authenticity is one of its greatest strengths. Historical accuracy in cinema is rarely absolute. Filmmakers must constantly balance fact, pacing, audience engagement, and dramatic impact. Enter the Dragon was never intended to recreate a specific historical event. Instead, it reflects a broader historical moment in which martial arts culture, international cinema, and changing audience tastes were beginning to intersect on a global scale. The early 1970s represented a period of increasing Western interest in Eastern philosophy, martial arts training, meditation practices, and alternative approaches to personal development. Bruce Lee arrived at exactly the right moment culturally. Audiences were becoming curious about ideas that had previously received relatively little mainstream exposure. The film captured this shift with remarkable timing. From an educational perspective, one of the most authentic elements of the movie is its treatment of martial arts as more than physical combat. Throughout Bruce Lee's real-life teachings, martial arts were closely connected to discipline, adaptability, self-awareness, and continuous learning. The film reflects these principles repeatedly. Victory is rarely portrayed as a product of brute force alone. Scientifically speaking, many of the fighting techniques displayed in the film are rooted in legitimate principles of biomechanics. Efficient movement conserves energy. Proper balance increases stability. Direct strikes often outperform unnecessarily complicated techniques. Bruce Lee's personal philosophy emphasized practical effectiveness over rigid tradition, an approach that aligns closely with modern understandings of athletic performance. Human reaction times visible throughout the film are generally presented within believable limits. Unlike some contemporary action productions where characters appear almost superhuman due to editing and visual effects, Enter the Dragon frequently allows viewers to appreciate realistic speed and timing. Bruce Lee was exceptionally fast, but much of what audiences witness originated from genuine physical ability rather than technological enhancement. The film also demonstrates a surprisingly accurate understanding of psychological intimidation. Real confrontations often begin long before physical contact occurs. Body language, confidence, eye contact, posture, and emotional control influence outcomes significantly. Many of the film's most memorable moments derive power from anticipation rather than impact. The tournament structure itself deserves examination. While the specific event portrayed in the film is fictional, competitive fighting tournaments have existed throughout history in various forms. The movie adapts these concepts into a dramatic narrative framework. The result may not be historically precise, but it remains believable enough for audiences to accept the premise without difficulty. Han's criminal operation introduces a more fictionalized dimension. While organized crime networks certainly exist throughout history, the scale and secrecy of the island operation are exaggerated for dramatic effect. This is a common cinematic technique. Filmmakers often amplify real-world threats into concentrated symbols that audiences can understand quickly and emotionally. From a criminology perspective, however, the underlying themes remain realistic. Power, wealth, corruption, exploitation, and secrecy frequently appear together in real criminal enterprises. The film simplifies these dynamics for narrative clarity, but does not invent them entirely. Its portrayal functions more as symbolic realism than literal realism. Cultural representation is another area worth examining carefully. The film played a major role in introducing aspects of martial arts culture to international audiences. While some simplifications inevitably occurred, the production treated martial arts traditions with considerably more respect than many contemporary Western depictions. This contributed to its lasting credibility. Bruce Lee himself served as an important source of authenticity. Productions often hire consultants to improve accuracy. Enter the Dragon possessed something even more valuable. Its central performer was one of the world's foremost martial arts practitioners. His expertise influenced choreography, movement philosophy, and the overall presentation of combat. The physical training visible throughout the film also reflects realistic athletic principles. Effective fighters require conditioning, coordination, endurance, flexibility, and technical proficiency. These capabilities cannot be fabricated quickly. Audiences subconsciously recognize this authenticity because genuine athletic performance exhibits qualities difficult to imitate artificially. Scientific accuracy becomes particularly interesting when examining Lee's approach to efficiency. In engineering, systems are often optimized by eliminating unnecessary complexity. Bruce Lee advocated a similar philosophy within martial arts. Remove wasted motion. Focus on effectiveness. Adapt to circumstances. This mindset resembles principles found in modern engineering, systems design, and performance science. The famous mirror room climax offers an excellent example of symbolic rather than scientific realism. While the setting is highly theatrical, the underlying concept possesses psychological validity. Human perception can be distorted by confusion, distraction, and uncertainty. The sequence transforms these cognitive realities into a visual metaphor audiences can immediately understand. The film's injuries and combat consequences occupy a middle ground between realism and entertainment. Real fights are often less visually elegant and considerably more chaotic than cinematic representations. However, Enter the Dragon generally avoids the extreme exaggerations common in many action genres. Physical effort, fatigue, and vulnerability remain visible throughout much of the narrative. Historically, the film's most significant achievement may be its role in changing perceptions. It demonstrated that martial arts cinema could achieve mainstream international success. This influence is measurable. Countless filmmakers, Actors, athletes, and audiences cite the movie as a formative inspiration. Its cultural impact became a historical fact in its own right. Researchers studying global cinema frequently point to Enter the Dragon as a pivotal moment in cross-cultural filmmaking. The production helped bridge industries, audiences, and storytelling traditions. In this sense, the film's historical significance extends far beyond its plot. It became part of cinema history itself. Ultimately, the movie succeeds because it understands that authenticity is not solely about factual precision. Authenticity emerges when behavior feels believable, principles feel meaningful, and emotions feel true. Enter the Dragon combines historical influences, martial arts expertise, psychological insight, and dramatic storytelling into a package that remains educational as well as entertaining. Even decades later, it continues rewarding viewers who look beyond the action and examine the deeper realities hidden beneath the spectacle. Cinematography is often described as painting with light, but in practical terms it is far closer to engineering. Every image captured by a camera represents a series of technical decisions involving optics, exposure, composition, movement, contrast, and color. Enter the Dragon remains visually impressive not because it possessed unlimited resources, but because its filmmakers understood how to convert simple visual ingredients into memorable emotional experiences. The result is a film whose imagery continues to feel elegant and purposeful more than 50 years after its release. One of the first things viewers notice is the clarity of visual storytelling. The camera rarely appears confused about where attention should be directed. Every frame guides the eye naturally. This may sound simple, but achieving such clarity requires extraordinary discipline. Great cinematography is often invisible because audiences instinctively understand where to look without realizing they are being guided. Composition plays a central role throughout the film. Characters are frequently positioned within frames in ways that communicate status, power, isolation, or tension. A confident leader may occupy the center of a frame. A vulnerable individual may appear surrounded by negative space. These visual choices communicate information before a single word is spoken. The island setting provides the cinematographers with a remarkable visual laboratory. Open courtyards, stone pathways, ceremonial spaces, tropical landscapes, and interior chambers each possess unique visual identities. Rather than treating locations as passive backgrounds, the film transforms them into active storytelling tools. From a visual engineering perspective, the production demonstrates excellent spatial awareness. Audiences always understand where characters are located relative to one another. This becomes particularly important during action sequences. Confusing geography weakens engagement because viewers lose orientation. Enter the Dragon consistently preserves spatial clarity. Lens selection contributes significantly to this achievement. Different lenses alter how audiences perceive distance, scale, and movement. Wider lenses emphasize environmental context and create a stronger sense of place. Longer lenses compress space and intensify focus on individual subjects. The filmmakers use these tools strategically to shape emotional responses. Lighting design deserves special attention because it helps establish the film's dual identity. On one level, the island appears luxurious and inviting. On another, it conceals danger and corruption. Lighting frequently reinforces this contrast. Bright exteriors suggest openness and confidence, while darker interiors hint at secrets hidden beneath the surface. This relationship between light and meaning forms one of cinema's oldest artistic traditions. Human beings naturally associate illumination with knowledge and darkness with uncertainty. Enter the Dragon employs these psychological associations effectively without becoming overly obvious or theatrical. The tournament sequences provide excellent examples of visual efficiency. The audience must simultaneously appreciate athletic performance, understand tactical developments, and remain emotionally invested. Achieving all three objectives requires careful coordination between camera placement, performer movement, and editorial rhythm. Bruce Lee's screen presence benefits enormously from the cinematography. Great cinematographers understand that cameras do not merely record subjects. They interpret them. Through framing, timing, distance, and movement, the film consistently emphasizes Lee's precision, control, and confidence. The result is a visual portrayal that feels larger than life while remaining grounded in reality. Dynamic range is another fascinating aspect of the production. Modern digital cameras capture enormous amounts of visual information across bright and dark areas. Enter the Dragon operated within more limited technological constraints, making exposure decisions particularly important. The cinematographers carefully balance highlights and shadows to preserve detail while maintaining mood. Color science, although less technologically sophisticated than contemporary workflows, still plays an important role. Earth tones, natural greens, stone textures, costumes, and environmental details create a visual palette that feels cohesive and believable. Rather than overwhelming viewers with aggressive stylization, the film prioritizes visual harmony. Camera movement is used with remarkable restraint. Modern productions sometimes employ constant motion in an attempt to create excitement. Enter the Dragon demonstrates that movement has greater impact when used intentionally. A moving camera attracts attention because movement signifies importance. By avoiding unnecessary motion, the filmmakers preserve its effectiveness. One of the most impressive visual achievements involves the communication of power. Powerful characters often appear visually dominant through composition, angle selection, and environmental positioning. Yet the film avoids excessive exaggeration. The audience senses authority without feeling manipulated by the camera. Geometry appears repeatedly throughout the film's visual design. Hallways create leading lines. Courtyards establish symmetry. Architectural structures organize visual information. These geometric elements create order within the frame, allowing viewers to process complex scenes quickly and intuitively. The famous mirror sequence represents perhaps the film's most celebrated example of visual engineering. Mirrors multiply perspectives, distort spatial awareness, and complicate perception. Technically, such scenes require careful planning because reflections introduce additional challenges for camera placement and visual continuity. Psychologically, the mirror environment transforms cinematography into storytelling. The audience experiences uncertainty alongside the characters. Multiple reflections create ambiguity. Reality becomes difficult to distinguish from illusion. The visual design itself becomes an active participant in the narrative rather than a passive recording mechanism. From an educational standpoint, the sequence remains a valuable lesson in how visual techniques can communicate abstract ideas. Instead of explaining confusion through dialogue, the film allows viewers to experience confusion directly through imagery. This is visual storytelling operating at a high level of sophistication. Ultimately, the cinematography of Enter the Dragon succeeds because it balances artistry and engineering. Every frame serves both emotional and practical functions. The cameras capture movement clearly, communicate information efficiently, reinforce psychological themes, and strengthen audience engagement. Decades later, the film remains a compelling study in how optics, composition, lighting, and visual design can transform physical reality into cinematic emotion. The technology may have evolved dramatically since 1973, but the principles demonstrated here remain timeless. Sound is one of cinema's most invisible investments. Audiences often leave a theater remembering images, characters, and story moments, yet much of the emotional power behind those memories originates from sound. Enter the Dragon understands this principle exceptionally well. The film's sound design does not simply accompany the visuals. It amplifies tension, reinforces psychology, and transforms physical movement into emotional experience. Like a wise investor allocating capital toward long-term value, the filmmakers invested carefully in immersion. Human beings process sound differently from images. We can close our eyes, but it is much more difficult to ignore sound. Evolution trained our ears to monitor threats, opportunities, and environmental changes continuously. Filmmakers exploit this reality by using audio to influence emotional responses, often without conscious awareness. One of the film's greatest audio strengths is its restraint. Modern action productions sometimes overwhelm audiences with constant noise, relentless music, and excessive sonic intensity. Enter the Dragon frequently allows moments of quiet anticipation. Silence becomes a strategic asset. By reducing auditory activity before important events, the filmmakers increase the impact of what follows. This principle mirrors financial investment strategies. Scarcity increases perceived value. When dramatic sound is used continuously, its effectiveness declines. When reserved for meaningful moments, its emotional return increases significantly. Enter the Dragon demonstrates this understanding repeatedly throughout its runtime. The sounds associated with martial arts combat deserve particular attention. Every strike, block, movement, and impact contributes to audience perception. These sounds do not merely communicate physical contact. They communicate force, precision, timing, and consequence. The audience hears discipline as much as they see it. Sound effects teams often face an interesting challenge. Real-world sounds frequently lack the dramatic qualities audiences expect. A genuine punch may sound surprisingly unimpressive. Cinema therefore creates enhanced auditory versions of reality. The goal is not perfect accuracy, but emotional authenticity. Enter the Dragon balances this relationship effectively. Bruce Lee's vocal expressions became one of the film's most recognizable audio signatures. These sounds serve multiple functions simultaneously. They communicate exertion, rhythm, confidence, focus, and psychological intensity. More importantly, they distinguish his fighting style from everyone else's. In branding terms, they create a unique sonic identity. Sonic identity is enormously valuable in entertainment. Just as companies develop logos and visual branding, films often develop distinctive audio characteristics. Audiences can frequently recognize a famous sound before they identify its source. Bruce Lee's vocalizations became part of the film's cultural footprint and contributed to its lasting memorability. Environmental audio also plays an important role throughout the movie. Wind moving through open spaces, distant conversations, footsteps across stone surfaces, water movement, crowd reactions, and atmospheric background sounds all help construct a believable world. Without these layers, scenes would feel strangely empty. Sound designers often describe this process as world building. Viewers may not consciously notice every auditory detail, yet collectively these sounds create immersion. The audience begins feeling present within the environment rather than simply observing it from a distance. The island setting benefits enormously from this approach. Different locations possess distinct sonic personalities. Open courtyards feel different from enclosed chambers. Public gatherings sound different from secret investigations. Every environment communicates information through sound before visual details are fully processed. Music represents another critical investment within the film's emotional architecture. A score functions almost like an invisible narrator. It guides attention, influences mood, and shapes expectations. Effective music rarely tells audiences what to think. Instead, it creates emotional conditions that enhance storytelling. The musical score of Enter the Dragon successfully blends suspense, action, mystery, and atmosphere. It reflects both the international nature of the production and the unique identity of the story. The result feels distinctive without becoming distracting. Viewers remember the experience rather than specific technical decisions. From a production standpoint, composing music requires balancing artistic ambition with practical constraints. Composers must create themes that support multiple scenes, emotional tones, and narrative developments. A strong musical theme can generate extraordinary value because it continues influencing audience perception throughout the entire film. Dynamic range management is another fascinating aspect of sound production. Dynamic range refers to the difference between quiet and loud moments. Effective films create variation. Tension often grows in quieter environments before releasing through louder dramatic events. Enter the Dragon demonstrates this principle repeatedly. The tournament scenes provide excellent examples. Crowd reactions, environmental noise, dialogue, impacts, and music must coexist without overwhelming one another. Achieving this balance requires careful mixing decisions. Every audio element competes for attention, and the sound team must determine which deserves priority at any given moment. Sound mixing is frequently compared to conducting an orchestra. Individual instruments may sound impressive independently, but success depends upon harmony. The same principle applies to film audio. Dialogue, effects, music, and environmental layers must support one another rather than compete destructively. The famous mirror room climax once again demonstrates sophisticated audio storytelling. Visual confusion alone would not create the same level of suspense. Sound contributes heavily to uncertainty. Echoes, movement cues, impacts, and environmental reflections enhance psychological tension. The audience experiences disorientation through both sight and sound. Looking at the film through a business lens, sound represents a high-return investment. Compared with major visual effects expenditures, audio enhancements can produce enormous emotional value at relatively modest cost. Well-designed sound increases immersion, improves audience satisfaction, and strengthens memorability. Few investments generate such consistent returns. Ultimately, the sound design and music production of Enter the Dragon illustrate how cinema engages far more than the eyes. Through careful mixing, environmental detail, musical storytelling, dynamic range control, and distinctive sonic identity, the film transforms movement into emotion and action into experience. The audience may arrive expecting to watch a martial arts film, but through sound they become participants in its world. That invisible achievement remains one of the reasons the movie continues resonating with viewers across generations. By the time Enter the Dragon reached audiences in 1973, the film industry was beginning to understand a powerful truth. Creating a great movie and successfully selling a great movie are two entirely different challenges. Production creates the product. Marketing creates awareness. Without effective marketing, even extraordinary films can disappear unnoticed. Enter the Dragon succeeded not only because of its quality, but because its release strategy positioned it as an event audiences felt compelled to experience. Modern studios rely on enormous quantities of audience data, social media metrics, algorithmic forecasting, and digital advertising analytics. Enter the Dragon emerged decades before these systems existed. Yet many of the same marketing principles were already operating. The filmmakers needed to identify target audiences, communicate value clearly, and generate enough excitement to motivate ticket purchases. One of the film's greatest marketing advantages was differentiation. In crowded marketplaces, attention is scarce. Products that resemble everything else often struggle to stand out. Enter the Dragon offered something distinct. Martial arts had appeared in cinema before, but rarely with this level of production value, international ambition, and charismatic star power. In marketing terms, Bruce Lee functioned as the film's unique value proposition. Audiences could find action elsewhere. They could find adventure elsewhere. What they could not easily find was Bruce Lee. His authenticity, skill, philosophy, and screen presence created a competitive advantage that other productions found difficult to replicate. Successful marketing often begins by identifying a clear answer to a simple question: why should consumers choose this product instead of alternatives? Enter the Dragon answered that question effectively. It promised excitement, authenticity, cultural novelty, and world-class martial arts performance in a single package. If modern analytics had existed during the film's release, marketers would likely have observed unusually strong engagement indicators. Audience curiosity would have been high. Word-of-mouth discussion would have expanded rapidly. Repeat viewing behavior might have revealed exceptionally positive satisfaction scores. Many characteristics associated with viral growth today were already visible in the film's reception. Trailer strategy provides an interesting area of analysis. A trailer serves as a compressed advertisement attempting to communicate value within a limited time frame. Effective trailers do not reveal everything. They create curiosity while demonstrating enough quality to justify consumer interest. Enter the Dragon possessed abundant trailer material because its visual strengths were immediately recognizable. Action scenes, exotic locations, tournament imagery, mystery elements, and Bruce Lee's remarkable athleticism all translated effectively into promotional materials. This created a significant advantage. Some films contain strengths that are difficult to communicate quickly. Enter the Dragon's strengths were highly visible. Audience segmentation also played an important role. Different consumer groups often respond to different messages. Action fans were attracted by combat sequences. Martial arts enthusiasts were attracted by authenticity. General audiences were attracted by suspense and adventure. International audiences were attracted by cultural uniqueness. The film successfully appealed to multiple segments simultaneously. From a CPM perspective, modern advertisers would find this audience mix particularly attractive. The film attracted viewers interested in fitness, discipline, self-improvement, sports, entertainment, and international culture. Such audiences often overlap with premium advertising categories that command stronger rates and higher engagement. The movie also benefited from what marketers call social proof. Social proof occurs when consumer interest increases because other consumers appear enthusiastic. Positive audience reactions create momentum. Every satisfied viewer effectively becomes a voluntary ambassador for the product. Word-of-mouth marketing remains one of the most powerful promotional tools ever created because it is built upon trust. Consumers frequently trust recommendations from friends, family, and peers more than traditional advertising. Enter the Dragon generated substantial social proof because audiences genuinely enjoyed discussing the experience. Another fascinating aspect of the film's marketing success involves timing. Great marketing often depends not merely on messaging but on cultural readiness. Markets become receptive to certain ideas at specific moments. Bruce Lee's rise coincided with growing international curiosity about martial arts, discipline, personal development, and Eastern philosophy. Modern audience analytics teams frequently search for emerging trends before they become mainstream. In many respects, Enter the Dragon arrived precisely as such a trend was accelerating. The production did not create audience curiosity from nothing. It recognized existing demand and delivered a superior product into that environment. International distribution further amplified the film's reach. Rather than focusing exclusively on one market, the project embraced global opportunities. This resembles modern growth strategies in which successful companies expand beyond domestic markets to increase revenue potential and diversify risk. If social media platforms had existed in 1973, the film likely would have generated extraordinary engagement. Bruce Lee's training clips, philosophical insights, action sequences, and behind-the-scenes material would have been highly shareable content. The production possessed many qualities associated with modern digital virality. Brand building represents another critical lesson. The movie did not merely market a single release. It strengthened Bruce Lee's personal brand and expanded the visibility of martial arts cinema more broadly. Effective marketing frequently creates assets that continue generating value long after initial campaigns conclude. From a business perspective, one of the most impressive achievements was efficiency. Marketing budgets were far smaller than contemporary blockbuster standards, yet the film achieved extraordinary awareness. This indicates strong message market alignment. When products resonate naturally with audiences, promotional spending often becomes more efficient. Looking through the lens of modern audience analytics, Enter the Dragon demonstrates many indicators of exceptional performance: strong differentiation, clear positioning, broad demographic appeal, positive word-of-mouth velocity, international scalability, authentic branding, and sustained cultural relevance. These characteristics explain why the film succeeded not merely as a theatrical release, but as a long-term global phenomenon. Ultimately, the marketing strategy behind Enter the Dragon succeeded because it aligned perfectly with the product itself. The promotion promised authenticity, excitement, discipline, and spectacle. The film delivered exactly those qualities. When marketing and reality remain aligned, trust grows. When trust grows, audiences become advocates. And when audiences become advocates, a movie evolves from a release into a cultural event whose influence extends far beyond its original advertising campaign. Critical reception is one of the most fascinating forms of economic feedback in cinema. When a film enters the marketplace, it is evaluated not only by audiences but also by critics, journalists, industry professionals, academics, and future generations of filmmakers. Some productions generate immediate enthusiasm and then disappear from cultural memory. Others begin modestly before gaining recognition over time. Enter the Dragon achieved something far rare. It succeeded commercially, impressed critics, influenced artists, and retained relevance for decades. That combination is extraordinarily difficult to achieve. At the time of its release, reviewers immediately recognized that the film offered more than conventional action entertainment. While audiences certainly appreciated the combat sequences, Many critics also observe the charisma of Bruce Lee, the efficiency of the storytelling, and the unusual ability of the film to bridge cultural and cinematic traditions. The movie felt fresh because it introduced many viewers to an entirely different style of action filmmaking. Critical reviews often function like market analysts evaluating a new company. They examine strengths, weaknesses, competitive advantages, and long-term viability. In the case of Enter the Dragon, one of the most frequently identified advantages was authenticity. Critics sensed that Bruce Lee represented something genuine rather than manufactured. Authenticity creates long-term value because it ages more slowly than trends. Fashion changes. Marketing strategies evolve. Technologies advance. Genuine skill remains impressive regardless of era. This explains why modern audiences continue responding positively to performances that were captured more than 50 years ago. Audience reception proved equally important. Financial success often depends on consumer satisfaction rather than critical praise alone. Enter the Dragon performed exceptionally well in this regard. Viewers embraced the film enthusiastically, helping transform it into a global phenomenon. Strong audience approval generated repeat viewings, recommendations, and sustained demand. Awards provide another interesting lens through which to evaluate cinematic success. Awards are not perfect measures of quality, but they influence perception, prestige, and commercial opportunities. Enter the Dragon was not primarily positioned as an awards-focused prestige drama. Instead, it competed within a genre that historically received less recognition from major awards institutions. Yet influence often proves more valuable than trophies. Many films accumulate awards before gradually fading from public memory. Enter the Dragon followed the opposite trajectory. Its cultural impact expanded year after year, generation after generation. In economic terms, its value appreciated rather than depreciated. Cultural capital is one of the most important concepts when analyzing legacy. Financial capital generates monetary returns. Cultural capital generates influence. A film possessing significant cultural capital affects future creators, shapes public conversations, and alters industry behavior. Enter the Dragon accumulated enormous cultural capital. The movie transformed perceptions of martial arts cinema internationally. Before its release, many audiences viewed martial arts productions as niche entertainment. After its success, studios recognized the genre's commercial potential. Entire categories of filmmaking expanded because one project demonstrated market viability. Bruce Lee's legacy became inseparable from the film's enduring reputation. Over time, he evolved from successful actor to cultural icon. Icons create extraordinary long-term value because their influence extends beyond individual works. New audiences continue discovering them long after original release periods have ended. From a branding perspective, this is remarkable. Most entertainment properties experience declining awareness as decades pass. Enter the Dragon continued attracting new viewers through television broadcasts, home video releases, streaming platforms, educational discussions, documentaries, and cultural references. The audience base effectively renewed itself across generations. Modern review aggregation systems did not exist in 1973, but contemporary critical assessments remain overwhelmingly positive. Scholars, critics, filmmakers, and historians frequently cite the movie as one of the most influential martial arts films ever produced. Such consensus rarely emerges without substantial merit. Academic interest further strengthens the film's legacy valuation. Universities, film schools, cultural studies programs, and media researchers continue examining the production. Educational engagement creates a unique form of longevity because institutions preserve and revisit influential works continuously. The film also benefits from extraordinary rewatch value. Rewatch value functions almost like customer retention in business. A product that consumers repeatedly return to possesses greater long-term worth than one experienced only once. Enter the Dragon rewards repeated viewing because audiences discover new details in choreography, cinematography, psychology, and storytelling. Another important component of legacy involves influence on future products. Countless action films, martial arts productions, video games, television series, and athletic personalities owe some degree of inspiration to Enter the Dragon. This influence represents a form of cultural licensing that extends far beyond direct financial accounting. If one were constructing a lifetime revenue forecast from the perspective of 1973, it would have been difficult to predict the film's ultimate performance. Revenue streams would eventually include theatrical re-releases, television rights, home media formats, international licensing agreements, streaming distribution, educational usage, and merchandise associated with Bruce Lee's enduring popularity. Collectability also contributes to long-term valuation. Posters, memorabilia, physical media editions, books, documentaries, and special releases continue attracting enthusiasts. Strong collector markets often indicate lasting emotional attachment between audiences and a property. Looking toward future decades, the film's position appears remarkably secure. Many productions depend heavily upon contemporary technology or temporary cultural trends. Enter the Dragon relies primarily upon timeless foundations: discipline, courage, authenticity, conflict, philosophy, and personal growth. These themes remain relevant regardless of era. Legacy forecasting, therefore, becomes unusually optimistic. The film has already survived dramatic shifts in technology, distribution models, audience expectations, and entertainment competition. It continues attracting new viewers despite thousands of newer alternatives. Few cinematic assets demonstrate such resilience. Ultimately, the critical reception and long-term legacy of Enter the Dragon reveal a rare achievement. The film succeeded as entertainment, as business, as cultural exchange, and as artistic expression. Its influence expanded beyond box office performance into education, athletics, filmmaking, and global popular culture. More than half a century later, it remains one of cinema's clearest examples of how cultural capital, authentic talent, and creative vision can generate value that compounds across generations. As we arrive at the conclusion of Enter the Dragon, it becomes clear that the film's greatest achievement is not any individual fight sequence, memorable line, or dramatic confrontation. Its true accomplishment lies in the way it harmonizes art, technology, psychology, and commerce into a single cinematic experience. Many films succeed in one of these areas. Very few succeed in all of them simultaneously. What began as a relatively modest production evolved into a global cultural phenomenon because every major component of the project reinforced the others. The storytelling created emotional engagement. The technology captured authenticity. The psychology created depth. The financial strategy enabled worldwide distribution. Together, these elements formed a system far more powerful than any single contribution. Looking back through the lens of business, the film resembles an exceptionally successful startup. Investors accepted uncertainty. Creative leaders pursued innovation. Teams coordinated complex operations. A unique product entered the marketplace. Consumers responded enthusiastically. The result was extraordinary ROI that exceeded expectations and transformed an entire industry category. Yet financial success alone does not explain the movie's endurance. Countless profitable productions have faded from public memory. Enter the Dragon survived because it offered audiences something deeper than entertainment. Beneath the action exists a philosophy centered on discipline, adaptability, self-awareness, and purposeful action. These ideas remain relevant regardless of technological progress or changing cultural trends. Bruce Lee's presence continues to anchor the film's legacy. His performance demonstrates a rare combination of physical mastery and intellectual clarity. He communicates confidence without arrogance, strength without cruelty, and determination without recklessness. Such qualities create admiration that extends beyond simple fandom. Psychologically, the film reminds us that genuine power begins internally. Throughout the story, characters confront temptation, fear, greed, ego, and uncertainty. Some overcome these forces. Others become controlled by them. The narrative suggests that self-mastery is ultimately more valuable than dominance over others. The movie also offers an enduring lesson in leadership. Effective leaders observe before acting. They remain adaptable when circumstances change. They avoid unnecessary complexity. They focus attention on what truly matters. Lee repeatedly demonstrates these principles throughout the narrative, providing lessons applicable far beyond martial arts. From a technological perspective, the film remains a testament to craftsmanship. Modern filmmakers possess extraordinary tools, yet Enter the Dragon proves that technology achieves its highest value when supporting authentic human performance. Cameras, editing systems, sound equipment, and production workflows all serve the story rather than competing with it. The production's efficiency remains equally impressive. Limited resources were transformed into lasting cultural impact through intelligent planning, disciplined execution, and strategic decision-making. For students of filmmaking, entrepreneurship, and project management, this remains an invaluable case study. Educationally, the movie rewards multiple levels of analysis. Casual viewers can enjoy the action and suspense. Film students can examine cinematography and editing. Psychologists can explore behavior and decision-making. Business professionals can study branding, market positioning, and ROI. Few films offer such a broad range of learning opportunities. The film's international success also highlights the power of cultural exchange. Enter the Dragon demonstrated that great storytelling can cross geographic, linguistic, and cultural boundaries. It showed audiences that compelling human experiences are often universal even when presented through unfamiliar traditions or perspectives. Legacy is often discussed as though it emerges automatically from success. In reality, legacy is earned repeatedly. Each generation decides whether a work remains relevant. The continued popularity of Enter the Dragon indicates that audiences continue finding value within its themes, performances, and craftsmanship. That ongoing relevance is perhaps the highest compliment any film can receive. Financially, the project became one of cinema's most remarkable examples of value creation. A production with a relatively modest budget generated extraordinary commercial returns while simultaneously increasing the global visibility of martial arts cinema. Few investments achieve both economic and cultural impact at such scale. Artistically, the movie balances simplicity and sophistication. The narrative remains accessible, yet deeper layers emerge upon closer examination. This balance contributes significantly to longevity because viewers can appreciate different aspects of the film at different stages of life. Technologically, psychologically, and economically, Enter the Dragon remains surprisingly modern. Many of the principles visible throughout the production, efficiency, authenticity, strategic differentiation, audience engagement, and continuous learning, remain central to successful organizations today. Perhaps that is why the film continues resonating across generations. It is not merely about combat. It is about discipline confronting chaos. It is about purpose confronting corruption. It is about individuals choosing principles over convenience even when doing so involves risk. In a world increasingly shaped by technology, automation, and rapid change, the film quietly reminds viewers that human character remains the ultimate competitive advantage. Tools evolve. Markets change. Industries transform. Integrity, discipline, adaptability, and courage retain their value. The final lesson may be the simplest. Great achievements rarely emerge from a single talent. They emerge when vision, preparation, execution, and perseverance align toward a common objective. Enter the Dragon embodies that principle both within its story and within its creation. More than 50 years after its release, the film remains a powerful example of how art, technology, psychology, and capital can work together to create something enduring. It stands not merely as a martial arts classic, but as a timeless study in innovation, leadership, and human potential. If you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business and beauty of cinema together.